Imagine a dog, right? Like a dog making these incredibly complex, literally life or death tactical decisions.
Yeah, completely on their own.
Exactly, on their own, maybe 3 miles away from its owner, right in the middle of a blinding snowstorm.
It's intense.
It is. And now I want you to imagine taking that exact same biological hardware, packaging it all up, and just dropping it into, a two-bedroom suburban apartment.
That is quite the visual.
Right. Well, today we are decoding the Australian Shepherd. We've got our hands on this massive, just incredibly detailed veterinary and behavioral guide that's dedicated entirely to this breed. And our mission today is to basically extract the absolute core of what makes this dog tick.
And I have to say, it is a really profound contrast. The source material we're working through today, it doesn't just, list chores for dog owners.
Right. It's not just a to-do list.
Exactly. It builds this unified philosophy. Like, raising an exceptional Australian Shepherd isn't about finding a single silver bullet.
Like the perfect harness or something.
Right. Or the ultimate training treat. It's really an architecture that's built through thousands of thoughtful, seemingly ordinary choices that you make consistently over years.
Yeah, and for you listening, whether you are prepping to bring a completely chaotic puppy into your home right now, or maybe you're navigating the slower rhythms of life with a senior dog, or honestly, if you're just intensely curious about how canine biology and working breeds actually function, this deep dive is going to give you those mechanisms. We are unpacking the why and the how behind this dog's behavior.
And to understand the dog that's sitting on a modern living room rug today, you really have to examine the original blueprint.
The history.
Yes, the notes root everything in the breed's origin story on early American ranches. Specifically, managing these massive working flocks across the really steep, unforgiving terrain of the Sierra foothills.
And the defining feature of that environment, which the notes point out, is just total isolation. I mean, a rancher on horseback is navigating hundreds of acres.
Yeah, they can't be everywhere.
Right. They physically cannot monitor every perimeter or anticipate every predator.
And because of that massive distance, the ranchers couldn't use a dog that simply waited around for a whistle or, a verbal command.
It'd be too far away to even hear it.
Exactly. They required a partner capable of independent, spontaneous judgment. I mean, if a subset of the flock broke away toward a ravine, the dog had to calculate the trajectory, cut them off, and apply the exact right amount of physical pressure to turn them back.
With absolutely nobody close enough to help.
Nobody giving directions, just the dog making the call.
So it's basically like the dog sitting in a suburban living room is running this ancient, highly specialized tactical software.
That's a great way to put it.
Because the biological hardware hasn't changed one bit over the last century. And if you don't give that operating system the right inputs, the whole system is just going to short circuit.
It will. The hardware is so incredibly specialized, which is what makes the early shaping of that dog absolutely critical. It literally dictates whether those sharp working instincts become an incredible asset to your family or...
Massive destructive liability.
Exactly. And the source material actually takes a really fascinating stance on this early foundation.
Yeah.
It argues that if you are going the puppy route, the breeder you choose actually matters significantly more than the individual puppy you pick out of the litter.
Which, that emphasis on breeding creates a real philosophical tension in the notes, I think.
How so?
Well, if the breeder's foundation, like the genetic screening, the early neurological stimulation, if that is everything, what does that mean for the thousands of rescue Aussies sitting in shelters with completely unknown backgrounds?
Right.
It almost implies they're at a permanent disadvantage, doesn't it?
Well, the source actually makes a really careful pivot right there to address that. They say a poorly bred or under-socialized dog is not a broken dog, but the margin of error for the owner definitely shrinks. The material clarifies that while responsible breeding sets this ideal baseline, providing a rescue dog with thoughtful, consistent, and structured care matters just as much.
So the commitment is the same.
Exactly. The biological blueprint of the breed remains exactly the same, which means both paths, whether you're purchasing from a rigorous breeder or adopting a rescue, they demand the exact same level of commitment to structure once that dog walks through your front door.
Right. And part of establishing that structure involves capitalizing on a very specific developmental phase. The notes highlight this incredibly brief, highly sensitive socialization window.
Yes, between roughly 3 to 14 weeks of age.
Which is so short.
It is, but that window is when the dog's brain is at its most plastic,
Yeah.
Calm, positive exposure to novel environments, sounds, textures during these few weeks, it physically shapes the neural pathways.
Wow.
Yeah, it dictates their baseline confidence for the rest of their life. You are literally writing the base code for how they process stress.
And during this same early period, this is when those working instincts start misfiring in a modern home, right? The sources mention things like heel nipping and child herding,
Oh, absolutely.
which makes sense. I mean, if this dog was bred to control erratic movement in a flock of sheep, of course they're going to try to control a group of toddlers running erratically across the kitchen floor.
It's exactly the same trigger for them. The instinct to control movement is entirely natural, but owners so often make the mistake of thinking the puppy will simply, you know, grow out of it.
Just a phase, right?
Right, but the source emphasizes that you cannot wait it out. And you also can't just yell no at a genetic drive. You have to actively redirect the mechanism.
So how do you actually redirect a biological drive that strong? Because if yelling doesn't work, what does the source actually suggest you do?
You have to give that herding instinct a legal outlet.
A legal outlet.
Yeah. When the dog feels a compulsion to chase and nip at heels, you interrupt the sequence and immediately ask for a conflicting, complex behavior. Like asking them to target a specific toy with their nose, or you run through a really quick sequence of obedience commands, you are forcing them to engage the analytical part of their brain.
And that overrides the instinct.
Exactly. It overrides that primitive chase instinct. You satisfy their need to work, but you're doing it on your terms, not the toddler's.
That is so smart.
Yeah.
But surviving puppyhood and establishing that redirection, that's just a massive milestone. Maintaining a high-performance brain and body creates a totally different set of challenges as the dog matures.
It really does.
And owners often fall into a trap here. They assume that because the Australian Shepherd is this naturally active breed, just unleashing them in a park for an hour will magically produce a balanced dog.
That is probably one of the most pervasive misconceptions the source dismantles. The idea that physical exercise alone is the solution.
It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work at all for a cognitive breed.
It sounds to me like treating physical exercise without mental stimulation is like putting a genius on a treadmill for 2 hours. Like, sure, they might be physically exhausted at the end of it, but they are still completely bored, totally unfulfilled, and mentally frustrated. And a physically fit, mentally frustrated working dog is just a recipe for disaster.
A genius on a treadmill is the perfect visualization. The notes argue that physical and cognitive demands have to be engaged simultaneously.
Okay, so how does that look in practice?
Well, you can't just throw a ball mindlessly. You have to weave obedience, impulse control, or maybe scent work into the physical activity, like ask them to hold a stay while you go hide the ball.
Oh, so they have to work for it.
Right, it forces them to use their nose and their memory to find it. The mental drain of problem solving is what actually tires this breed out.
And the source also tackles this connected myth that this kind of training is just, a phase you push through in the first year.
Right, once they're trained myth.
Exactly. But for a breed, this cognitively driven mental engagement is a lifelong biological need. The notes are very clear that even a senior dog still needs problems to solve, even if the physical intensity scales way back.
The intelligence of the breed just demands an ongoing partnership. And keeping them physically capable of that partnership requires incredibly strict management of their fuel, too.
The food.
Yes, the metabolic efficiency of a herding dog means they often need far fewer calories than owners assume. And the source points out how deceptive their appearance can be when it comes to weight.
Because evaluating an Aussie's waistline by just looking at them, it's basically like trying to guess the shape of a car while it's hidden under a thick winter tarp.
That double coat hides a lot.
It totally does. They have this beautiful, dense double coat that completely masks their actual body condition.
Which means you have to physically put your hands under the tarp. The notes instruct owners to perform these consistent hands-on rib and waist checks.
What exactly are you feeling for?
You should be able to easily feel the ribs without pressing hard, and there should be a distinct tuck at the waist. Owners so often feed based on the activity level they wish their dog had.
Ah, right, the aspirational diet.
Exactly, rather than the reality of their daily routine. And that just leads to this gradual, silent weight gain.
Now that physical maintenance, the diet, the cognitive games, the exercise, that is all highly visible stuff. But the veterinary section of the source material outlines several invisible, breed-specific health risks that require really a completely different layer of vigilance.
They do. Because the Australian Shepherd was developed through concentrated selective breeding within a relatively small foundation population of working dogs.
Which gives them those great traits.
Right, but certain genetic vulnerabilities were amplified right alongside those working traits.
And the most prominent vulnerability the notes focus on is eye health. They list a whole spectrum of conditions. Let's see, hereditary cataracts, progressive retinal atrophy, and Collie eye anomaly.
Eye health is absolute core preventative care for this breed. It's not optional. To understand why it's so critical, we need to look at what these conditions actually do.
Let's start with progressive retinal atrophy, or PRA. What is that?
So PRA is a condition where the photoreceptors in the back of the eye slowly degrade. It usually starts with night blindness,
And
and then it progresses to total vision loss.
wow. And the hereditary cataracts.
Those cause an opacity in the lens. It basically blocks light from even reaching the retina.
And the last one, the Collie eye anomaly.
Right, CEA. That's a developmental defect where the blood vessels in the back of the eye just don't form correctly from birth.
So catching these early isn't just about documenting vision loss. I mean, it dictates how you manage the dog's environment and their safety before a crisis actually occurs.
Precisely. You have to know what you're dealing with.
Which brings us to another massive genetic factor that is completely invisible until it suddenly becomes a life or death emergency. The source really highlights this MDR1 sensitivity.
Yes. MGR1 stands for multi-drug resistance 1. It is a specific genetic mutation that affects the blood-brain barrier, and it is highly, highly prevalent in Australian Shepherds.
Okay, so how does that actually impact the dog when, say, they go to the vet for a normal visit?
Okay, think of the blood-brain barrier as having a bouncer at the door.
Okay.
In a normal dog, a specific protein acts like that bouncer. It actively catches toxic drugs and pumps them right back out, keeping them away from the brain tissue.
But in an Aussie with the mutation.
In an Aussie with the MDR1 mutation, that bouncer is essentially asleep at the door.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So common medications, we're talking certain over-the-counter antidiarrheals, specific anesthetics, and even certain heartworm preventatives, they just cross right past the barrier and into the brain.
And once those common medications are in the brain, they cause severe, sometimes fatal neurological toxicity.
Yes. And that is why the source is so adamant about this. Knowing your dog's MDR1 status isn't just a fun piece of genetic trivia for a certificate.
No, it's critical.
It is a critical piece of medical data. It must be documented and shared with every single veterinarian who ever treats your dog. It completely changes the playbook for anesthesia and routine prescriptions.
And the veterinary notes also elevate things that most owners consider standard maintenance into the category of critical care. Like continuous parasite prevention is highlighted.
Because of how they operate, yeah.
Right, because this breed's drive pushes them to navigate heavy brush and varied terrain where ticks and internal parasites are just rampant.
The source also reframes dental care entirely, which I found really interesting. It insists that dental hygiene is not a cosmetic issue to fix bad breath.
Like just making them nice to kiss.
Exactly, no. It is a systemic organ health issue. The bacteria from severe dental tartar doesn't just stay in the mouth. It enters the bloodstream and constantly taxes the dog's heart, their liver, and their kidneys over their entire lifespan.
It's all connected. But tracking the MDR1 status, the eye exams, the cognitive redirection, the hands-on rib checks, I mean, knowing they're normal sounds really simple on paper. But realistically, when life gets busy, and it always does, it's incredibly easy to miss a slight limp or, a 5% drop in appetite or some really subtle behavioral shift.
Yeah.
How does the source suggest we actually track all of this without driving ourselves completely crazy?
Well, the key is shifting away from subjective feelings and relying on objective routines.
Give me an example.
So you don't just guess if they are slowing down generally. You observe if they are routinely lagging behind at a specific marker on your normal hiking route. You watch how they navigate the stairs first thing in the morning when their joints are stiffest. The source introduces this concept of evaluating quality of life as a holistic lens.
And that lens isn't just something you, pull out in the last 6 months of a dog's life.
No, not at all.
The notes argue it should be applied continuously across all life stages. You are constantly balancing their mobility, their comfort, their cognitive engagement, and their appetite as one collective picture.
And as the dog transitions into their senior years, that baseline of normal will inevitably change. The physical hikes will shorten, the enrichment puzzles will need to accommodate fading vision or hearing, and veterinary interventions will just become more frequent.
Protecting that quality of life also means anticipating the worst-case scenarios, right? The guide really stresses emergency preparedness.
Yes. Being ready for things like an unexpected cluster of seizures, severe sudden lameness, or unexplained internal bleeding.
Which is terrifying to think about, but you have to.
You do. Preparedness means mapping out your after-hours veterinary strategy long before the emergency strikes. I mean, if you are rushing into an unfamiliar 24-hour clinic at 3 a.m., the attending vet doesn't know your dog.
They don't know the baseline.
Right. So having an accessible physical or digital file with their MDR1 status, recent blood work, and vaccination history means the medical team isn't starting blind. They can make safe, rapid decisions.
But I will say, going through a comprehensive checklist like this, it can induce a massive wave of guilt.
Oh, for sure.
You hear about the ideal socialization window and the rigorous cognitive training and the daily dental care, and it is so easy to fixate on the days you inevitably fell short. But the source actually anticipates this owner fatigue, doesn't it?
It does, and it addresses the myth that a good owner never makes mistakes.
Thank goodness.
Right. It is a vital misconception to dismantle. The standard of care detailed in these notes is not demanding absolute perfection. Every single owner is going to miss something.
Yeah.
You know, you will feed a bit too much over a busy winter, you will skip a training session, you might not catch a subtle behavioral shift until a week after it started.
So the goal isn't an unbroken streak of flawless management.
No. The goal is consistency over the long haul.
Consistency over perfection.
Exactly. Consistency means returning to the baseline. It is the overall pattern of care established across a decade, not the lapse of a single imperfect week.
So if you missed the run yesterday, you do the 15 minutes of targeted scent work today.
Right. Or if you forgot to brush their teeth all week, you just make sure you schedule the deep cleaning at the vet.
This circles us right back to the central philosophy of the entire guide. An Australian Shepherd's health, their behavioral balance, and their ultimate happiness are just the accumulation of tiny, ordinary choices.
It's the decision to interrupt the heel nipping with a command instead of just a yell. It's physically feeling for their ribs instead of just pouring another cup of kibble.
It's taking the time to confirm a medication is safe for an MDR1 sensitive dog.
Exactly. None of those individual actions transform the dog overnight, but strung together, year after year, they build an extraordinary life.
Before we wrap up this exploration, there's an unwritten undercurrent to all this source material that I think is really worth pondering.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we spent this whole time decoding how the modern Australian Shepherd is running ancient working dog software in a suburban world, right? Constantly demanding purpose and partnership and a job to do. But looking at the intense lengths we go to in order to fulfill those needs, you have to wonder what it says about us.
What do you mean?
Well, in an increasingly automated, highly disconnected modern world, maybe humans are so deeply drawn to these demanding, intense working breeds because we are the ones who secretly need a daily, unavoidable job to do. Maybe their relentless drive gives us the anchoring purpose that we're missing.
Wow, that's really profound. They force us to stay grounded in the present moment.
Exactly.
You're continuously engaged in the daily work of caring for another complex living thing.
It's powerful stuff. Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration. We hope unpacking these mechanisms gave you a deeper understanding of the incredible Australian Shepherd and the architecture of canine care. Keep exploring, keep asking how things work, and keep showing up for the animals in your lives.
And as a final reminder, the information discussed in this deep dive is for educational purposes only. If you ever have concerns about your dog's health or behavior, please always consult your veterinarian or a certified professional.